Hello and welcome to another episode of PPC Town Hall. My name is Fred Vallaeys. I'm your host. I'm also CEO and co-founder at Optimizer, a PPC management suite. So for today's episode, we don't have just one, but we have two guests, and they are both hosts of Marketing O'Clock, one of the best places to keep up with PPC news on YouTube. And we have Greg, Finn, and we have Christine, aka Shep. So let's bring in our guests and let's get rolling with this episode of PPC Town Hall. Greg, Shep, good to have you on. Welcome.
It's an honor to be on. Big time listener, and it's fantastic to be here with you.
Thanks for having us.
Hey, so tell folks a little bit about the podcast you have, the agency you have, your backgrounds. I think many people have probably seen you before, but not everyone. So let's do those introductions.
Yeah,
Greg,
absolutely. I'll go for it. I was going to jump in. So I'm Greg, Finn, and our agency is called Cypress North. And what you had alluded to before was Marketing O'Clock. It was sort of we were trying to make social content about 6 years ago, and we were making little clips about some things that happened in the news. And we're trying to do like an actual news show, like an actual news show, like serious. And when the cameras weren't rolling, we were just shoot it back and forth and just talk like we normally talk and talk about the topics and be like, this is so dumb. Like why, what, you know? Mm-hmm. And then Sammy, who was like recording us at the time, was like, this is actually better than your show. And so we're like, you know what? This might be better than our show. So we sort of took that personality and like trying to bring like what people are actually talking about with some of these changes and almost make it like a water cooler for everybody. And so we just, every Friday we break down the news, everything that you need to know. Shep and I are PPC people at heart. So it's really PPC heavy, but we do cover some like major SEO stuff. But that's sort of my take on Marketing O'Clock. Shep, what is your take and what do you do?
So I have been on the show for about 5 years now. I've been with Cypress North for about 6, and I cover the PPC lightning round. So all of the major trending PPC news of the week. And like Greg said, we really try to keep it light. So tell the people what they need to know, but make it really hands-on for how they can apply it in their own accounts, and also just keep it fun. It's never too serious. So it's always a good time. And we release it on Friday. So we know like we have to keep it fun or nobody would be interested on a Friday.
Yeah, no, and that's what I love is it is actually a news show. So there's a lot of visuals. There's a lot of showing what things are. And it goes into sort of the nitty gritty of small updates and things that aren't even really updates that Google announced, but that you just found. And so it's a really good way to get that additional level of news. And then obviously the back and forth and just like, is this actually important? Right? Google may say it's the biggest thing since sliced bread, but like, what are we actually going to do with it? So those are the conversations that I think are super useful and fun to listen to. So yeah, we'll put that in the show notes where people can find that podcast, but definitely check it out. So now on the show, you do talk about some of the Google updates, but you also talk about kind of like the broader Google news. And, I don't want to say tin hat conspiracy theories, but those are always fun to talk about, right? So Google recently had their earnings calls. What is your guys' take on what's happening over at Google?
I mean, I would just want to go on record and say that if you go to your couch and look under those cushions, there will be nothing there because the cushions are fully shaken at this point with the revenue. Highest revenue ever from search. YouTube had the highest earnings as well. Revenue, just a really great earnings call. And I haven't looked at the stock during the day today, been a little busy, but I would say it's not surprising. You know, like they are making a lot of smart moves that are really smart for their shareholders and maybe not as smart for advertisers.
Yeah, I agree. I think they're just really trying to squeeze every penny out of advertisers. And unfortunately, it's like a lot of smart bidding, and it will work really well. Like when we're looking at our end results, whether it's return on ad spend or the CPA for our client. But those CPCs can get pretty high. So I agree. Unfortunately, I was not surprised at all. Just the way the world is working. So again, good for their shareholders, not necessarily for me.
Yeah. Well, and it's kind of this dual view. It's in a way good for Google to be successful because it is where we know how to advertise and we kind of know the rules of the game, even if we don't always like them. But at the same time, there's this inkling that, hey, maybe is generative AI a whole different paradigm for how people search, and is that going to change the game? Is that going to make Google a little bit less strong in that space, or is even the DOJ, is that going to force some sort of a breakup of Google where it becomes more diversified? And I don't know how I feel about that, because at the end of the day, it is easier to manage most of your ad spend in one place as opposed to now have to figure out like, oh, there's one Google for shopping ads and there's one Google for search ads, and like if this it's all broken up, like that's actually more work for a lot of us, right? So I'm not sure that I have strong feelings one way or another, because they all come with pros and cons, I think.
Yeah, and it's who really knows what's going to happen with the verdict here. I do think like a lot of the findings, especially with like, you know, what we were joking about was shaking the cushions, which came from Jerry Dishler, was high up at Google Ads at the time. Didn't help their case at all. You know, and then seeing some of those fine tuning measures and some of the knobs that they can turn. I mean, in a way, like I think without some of those things, that they would have been better in a better spot, but really just kind of bringing some of those things to light really hurt their case. And I know that people have guessed from like one extreme to another as to what's going to happen here, and we don't really know. But I mean, I would imagine there's going to be something that's pretty substantial, even if it's letting other people place ads on YouTube. Something. I really don't even know yet what that is. Like the finding was ridiculous. Shep, did you read that? The findings where they're like, oh, you need to be able to opt out of broad match.
Oh yeah.
And it's like, we can already do this, DOJ. Like that was one of the things that they released in the findings. So I'm interested to see what happens.
I know. I'm really interested too. And I think it just speaks to like, it's very important to just diversify your skill set. And I know we're going to talk about that a lot today, but the future of Google is very uncertain. Anything can change and you just need to be ready to pivot if you need to, like using other platforms, even like totally different platforms. Like we've been playing a lot with Mountain and Spotify and just totally different things for the digital space, because it's not just PPC anymore. So I think that could be more and more important. And I'm always waiting for that Apple search engine that was rumored a couple of years ago. That was
Search GPT.
Well, yeah, Search GPT, but even Apple, if you look at the percent of search spend they own, and it's not search like we typically think about it, it's just the App Store search, right? And that is actually a huge amount of revenue. But there's just very little to manage, just like those universal campaigns from Google and those app campaigns. It's just, yeah, well, here's the app. Go and figure out who might want to click on it and install it. And that's sort of the end of the day. And I think that's also a little bit of the existential crisis and risk for PPC advertisers, is we've just been accustomed to so many levels of control. And like, sure, we can choose our match types. We can choose our bid management type. Like, yeah, you want automated bidding? Sure, but which flavor? And then within that flavor, which of the settings? Are you going to do portfolio? Are you going to bid caps? There's so many things that we still control that basically kind of safeguard our jobs at some level, because knowing all those levels of nuance, it takes a lot of effort. I mean, listen, you got to listen to Marketing O'Clock, otherwise you fall behind, and that's an hour of your week. I mean, as much fun as it may be, that's still time you got to put in to stay relevant. And then on the other side of the spectrum, it's like, oh yeah, maybe Gen AI fully automates everything, and you just give Google, you cut them a big check, and you tell them, this is how many sales we need. If you can achieve it, great. There's the money. Just go and do the thing.
Yeah, and that's the Mark Zuckerberg way, right? He had that quote where he's like, you know, at some point you'll just tell us what you want, and we'll just give it to you. And it's like, I've seen Meta ads, and I know that's not how it works, but yeah, I mean, it's things are getting more automated. I to your point, Fred, though, like things are very, very complicated, you know, and as much as Google can say that, like, you know, you could just set up a performance max and everything. Like, if you don't have your settings, if you don't know what you're doing in there, if you don't have the right conversions, I mean, you can really do some damage to yourself there.
Yeah, it's like they say, there's this example of you tell the AI, what's the thing called when AGI? The thing when artificial intelligence becomes as smart as humans and it's generalized. What's the term again?
I am not sure what that term is.
Okay, well, so there's the example where you basically tell an AI your job is to produce paper clips. And now it starts producing paper clips. And eventually it's like, well, I've built all the paper clips I can. And maybe my best next course of action is to start killing humans because some of their body parts are into paper clips. And so, but it's like this far-fetched example. It speaks to goals, right? You want to be very specific about the goals, but you also want to put some boundaries in place. And I think that's a lot of what we see at my company too. It's, some of the optimization is now done by the engines, but you want to put those guardrails in place because if you just, again, tell the machine, go and get me as many leads as possible. We've all seen that go horribly wrong, where it's just like, thousands of junk leads that you can't do anything with, and all your money's gone. Now what? So you have to be very precise about those goals, and I totally agree with what you're saying there.
Especially when you're talking about Google specifically, I feel like all you need to do is look at the recommendations tab to know that they're not always keeping your best interest in mind when they're making those like automated recommendations. And you always have to use your brain.
Yeah, you knew it from the beginning when you see these recommendations load in Ads Editor, and it's like, oh, I see this recommendation load that says raise budgets. Oh, weird. There's no recommendation loading that says lower budgets. Yeah. That's strange. Like, why is that? Like, are you really like recommending the right things for me? Because if you would be like unbiased. You know what I mean? But yeah, and I think there are a lot of those like kind of dark patterns and things like that really probably, skew the scale in the platform's favors.
Yeah, and with those recommendations, so we took a look at the API level specifications of those. What was fascinating was if you're on manual bidding, it is allowed to tell you to go into TCPA or TROAS. But once you're on TCPA or TROAS, if the performance is no longer where it needs to be, it is not allowed to recommend going back to manual. Or once you're in TCPA, it can never recommend to go to TROAS because those are considered equivalent. But we all know that TROAS, through value-based bidding, can actually produce better results. It's sort of that next level of sophistication. And that's where I'm somewhat hopeful that if you look at generative AI and you say, like, listen, here's my scenario, just tell me what I should do, like come up with all the possibilities. That is a much more comprehensive suite of recommendations than just a list that was coded by humans, which is like, in case A, B and C are the allowed next steps, right? But we forgot about, things changed, so maybe there should have been another nuance there. Whereas generative AI can learn that, it'll pick up on that, and tomorrow it may come back with a different set of recommendations because it is actually a lot smarter than just these logical if this then that conditions. And that's an example there of Google recommendations just not allowing you to go back and forth into what's right.
Yeah, and one note on that too, like, it's important to know where some of these recommendations that are AI generated are coming from, right? And Fred, I think it would be interesting to get your take on this, but Google's job is really shareholder driven, as we just talked about from, we just saw the earnings. They are the ones making the recommendations to you. And obviously we talked about a couple of examples there where there was maybe a recommendation one way, but not the other way. And I think that's something that's important and why like Optimizer is still in need and not going to be going away. And why you're kind of leaning into that is because you're sort of in this like unbiased island by yourself where you aren't beholden to putting people one way or another or trying to get the most, per click. You're trying to do almost the opposite of it. So I just of note, like, it's good to know where those AI recommendations are coming from.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's an important note there is that the Optimizer recommendations, we actually calculate them ourselves. And so they are independent from what Google is recommending. So you are going to get the thing that says, hey, maybe your budget should be decreased, or maybe you should lower your bid because you're not hitting your cost per acquisition targets. And like you said, right, so I think sometimes it's a bit unfair when people say Google is only beholden to the shareholders, because that's a bit of a short-term view, right? And that's how companies get in trouble. They say, like, listen, let's shake the cushions for everything that's in there. But what's going to happen is you're going to bankrupt all of your customers in the process. And then what happens next quarter when all those customers have no money left? Right. And so when I was at Google, it was always these three prongs, right? We have to do right by the advertiser, the publisher on AdSense, as well as the company. And the company, by and large, represents the shareholders. But so there is a little bit of the balancing of the needs that does have to happen. But you're right, in some of the algorithms that are coded or some of the software that is written, like the team may have been told, listen, we need to produce X% of revenue growth and, go achieve it however you need to achieve it. And so as much as Google does need advertisers to be successful, I think they often think too much about the averages, right? So you look at Google's earnings and, okay, revenue is up by X%, CTR is up by X%. Okay, that's great, but nobody cares about the average. Like me as one advertiser, what happened for me? Did you make it work for me? And I think that's where you need that different level of software that specifically takes your interest at heart so that you become disambiguated from the average and you become your own player. And your results need to be good. And maybe that comes at the cost of someone who's not doing it right and who's leaving it all to the automation from the ad platform. And just like in the stock market, right? For every winner, there's a loser. And on average, we look at the market moving in one direction. But you, as an individual advertiser, you want that power to automate for you, to have guardrails for you, so that you're going to be the winner in that bigger ecosystem.
Yeah, and to counterpoint what you just said, I've been talking about that for 6 years on the show, that you don't want to, you have a golden goose that's laying these golden eggs and you don't want to kill the golden goose. I just feel like over the last 5 years, that goose is hurting, right? Like, and I don't know when the last time you were at Google was with the 3-prong approach, but if it was before 2018 at least, like, I feel like there was and we saw it in some of the DOJ stuff where it anybody who's an advertiser can't look at that and feel good about it, I would say. But I also do feel like things are getting better. Like this year, there have been a lot of changes for Performance Max that are really good, that have loosened up the full automation and full AI side of things to say like, okay, you come in Q4, we'll have some negatives and you can do new customer acquisition, things like that, like that are big. But and it's also like, it's just tough as an advertiser, when you see some of the stuff come out and you're like, I knew this was happening.
Yeah, I agree. I can kind of see them trying to make advertisers happy, but I mean, when you're taking away eCPC, like how could you say you're trying to make advertisers happy? Like that is just such a useful tool, especially for smaller businesses, to use some of that automation while still maintaining a lot of control. But at the same time, they did give us so much more control over PMax this year, like Greg said. So I feel like it's like this dance they're always doing of like taking things away and then also doing these little things to keep us happy, like keep us coming back. So just kind of crazy.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think we see sort of this cycle, right? Where, like we said already, Google Ads has become very complicated. And so it's frustrating for a new advertiser or someone who's not a professional marketer to come in and like figure this out. So then Google says, okay, let's dump everything we had. Let's be more like Facebook, where it's just tell us what you want, tell us how much money you got, and we'll figure it out. and that worked on Facebook. And I'm not saying it works well, but it works because that's always been the way it's been. Facebook ads started existing in a world when artificial intelligence and machine learning was good enough to do some of these things. And so you never had the additional controls. And so you never expected them. But with Google, we came from such a manual world where literally everything down to the misspelled variation of your broad match keyword. If you didn't put that in, you wouldn't get the impression. Right? Everything was down to the CPC. It was such tight control, and it was like these massive structures. And Christine, I know you talk about structures in your talks that you give it at SMX, but like how many campaigns do you need and how many ad groups? Right? But we've just been so accustomed to these levels of control. And then Google says, okay, let's throw all of that away. We have something simple. It's called PMax. You just tell us a few things and we'll take it from here. And then our advertiser reflexes kick in and it's like, oh, well, but we used to have negative keywords and we used to have this and we used to have that. And so we're really unhappy. And so Google slowly gives us these things back. But, every time they give us a thing back, it becomes more complicated and more complicated. And there's more levers. And how does that lever interact with that lever? And so now we're left with, this new thing, PMax, it's really not that simple. I mean, and then frankly, like how many people have actually figured out PMax? Like you either hear people say, PMax works for us or it doesn't. But if you're in that camp of it doesn't really work, like there's really very few things you can do to truly make it shine. And that's the frustration, right? And so then Google eventually is going to say, well, okay, this PMax thing became kind of complicated. We have much better generative AI at this point. So let's have this new campaign type, which is called Super PMax. And it'll do everything for you. You don't have to touch it. And then they'll be like, ooh, can we take away PMax now that we have Super PMax? And the cycle starts all over again.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's a good point, and I do think PMax, I think there were two like fundamental issues with PMax. One, I don't think it was ready to be rolled out when it was ready, right? Like when PMax rolled out, we didn't see the results that we may have wanted. Shopping is a little bit different, but PMax today, if you have the right, a substantial amount of conversions, everybody should be able to kind of get it to work or do well, even if you have to limit things and max conversion value or max conversion it. But when it like launched, it wasn't phenomenal, and they sort of built it as they went with that, which was an interesting take, I'd say. But yeah, I mean, I think they realized that people are more comfortable with a little bit of control with the AI kind of running the machine there. And then to your point about campaigns, like that's sort of where it's our job to expand into, maybe it's not just, hey, we're going after leads, or we need to sell, just look at top line ROAS or something. But we need to like be really focused on business objectives and be like less about tactics and more about strategy.
So let's dive into Gen AI a little bit more. So Christine, do you have a take on the AI overviews on Google and sort of like what's the consumer experience changing to, and how is that impacting what advertisers do?
So I would say, circling back to what Greg just said about PMax, actually, my biggest problem with AI overviews is I feel like they rolled them out before they were fully ready. So now there's like a big trust issue on the consumer side. And then they were showing them a lot less for a while. So I feel like they just weren't fully rolling out, and there were so many bad examples of them in the SERPs. And now they're kind of like battling to like make them look good again and people trust them again. And then from an advertiser perspective, I feel like we still don't really know like fully how they're going to look, especially for search. We've seen a couple of screenshots about like they had the image in it, but we still don't really know how that experience is going to look. So still trying to work through that too, to see like how it's going to work out at the end of the day.
No, I mean, I think with AI overviews, like it is a strange rollout. You're like, this week we're up to 100 new countries and 1 billion more people are getting AI overviews. That's phenomenal. But I still have had trouble. Like they've showed up a lot, then they went away, then they showed up a lot, then they sort of are here and there. And then they're showing up for things that like have typically been like a sacred ground for Google, which is like your money or life terms, things like that, and kind of showing some bad examples in many cases, or maybe misleading examples. I kind of question that rollout, and then every single example they give us is how to get a stain out of my clothes. I've seen that example 4 times from Google. It's like, look at this ad. I'm like, I saw this in GML. Like, I know what this is. This is how to get a stain out of the clothes. You're going to tell me to use vinegar or something else, and you give me products. So I'm very interested to see. I think it's going to be, is it going to be horizontal cards? Is it going to be vertical cards? I'm sure image assets are going to play a huge role in this. And then on the Microsoft side of things too, because there are, more platforms, we got a conversion from Copilot, figured out how to get Copilot data out of shopping, and it can work, right? And it's kind of strange. I think it might be a bug, but you can kind of see some of the matching in there. And it's interesting, right? Like it's not perfect, but nothing is, especially with AI, like nothing's going to be perfect. But if the greater good is there and you can get the conversions, the revenue, and what you're looking for, that's great.
Yeah, circling back to that stain example again, I just feel like everything is e-commerce based, all of the examples. And AI overviews could be really great for lead gen. Like there are some long tail, like top of funnel keywords that could do really well for lead gen accounts. But I don't see the wheels turning in that direction where Google's planning on doing like a really good job for lead gen people or those like tougher inquiries. It's just all been like how to get a stain out of clothes. So
right.
I'm like excited about the potential, but I just feel like we're so far from seeing what's actually going to happen. It's been so long since it was announced, and we still don't really have ads in it yet.
Yeah. But then it's not just Google, right? It's also Search GPT. So if Google is going to refuse to answer that lead gen conversation that you want to have with a chat assistant, you'll go to Search GPT or just even Chat GPT. And so one interesting thing that I've been hearing, and I want to get your take on this, but Google is no longer a search engine. Google is a transaction engine. And I'm kind of finding that to be the case. It's just, I have a really hard time finding long tail things, whether they be products I want to put in my home, whether it's a piece of software that I've kind of heard about. Like everything seems to gravitate towards like the 10 most common, most popular things. And that more nuanced thing, it's hard to find because I don't know how to talk about it in Google keyword terms to trigger it to actually give me back the thing that I'm searching for, that I'm on a quest to find. Whereas I go to Chat GPT and I can just have like verbal diarrhea all over the conversation. And it's like, oh, well, somewhere within that, I understood what you actually meant. And here's the thing. Here's what this doohickey is called. And now I can go to Google and I can actually type that in. And maybe I finally find what I was looking for. But it is such a meaningfully better experience for me as a user, I think, to have a conversation with an assistant. But where it then all ends is I can't buy the thing through ChatGPT. I find what it is I want, but I have to go to Google to find where I can buy it, what the best price is, or where I can fill in the lead gen form to get in contact with that company. So what have you both heard on sort of like the evolving place of Google in the search consumer journey?
I think I got it. Shep, what is your go-to search engine right now?
Perplexity.ai.
Why do you like Perplexity?
I just think it does a really, really good job, first of all, understanding the intent. Like I always feel like it even does a better job than GPT lately. And I love the annotations. So you can click and see exactly where it came from, and then it would bring you to the website. So that's been really nice too. But again, I just think it does a better job, like stream of consciousness, asking my question and giving me what I want back. But mainly the annotations is, I think, what Greg was going for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm with Fred. Outside of work, I my number one source. I don't have access to Search GPT yet, but I use Chat GPT a ton. My biggest concern there is like sometimes you want to fact check or view more, and some of the citations are tough. I do love Perplexity.ai because the citations are great. And I do think that AI overviews will help with a lot of that stuff, to Fred's your point, right? Like now that they have lots of different links out there and citations and ability to go do more, I think that will help the usage of it, especially when things are, I would say, more regular. And when I'm seeing more AI overviews when I perform searches, I still think there's some fundamental holes where Google shies away from some of the things that people are really looking for, like comparisons specifically, or product reviews, where that's really not part of the AI overviews. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. But yeah, I mean, I think Google is really transactional, and I think a lot of the stuff they're doing makes a lot of sense in that format. Like the changes that they're doing right now to Google Shopping are monumental. And I've always thought that was sort of I know that they had Frugal back in the day, then they sort of took it away, and then they have Shopping. But it's always sort of been an afterthought to me, right? Like I think most people experience Google Shopping via product, formerly PLAs, or product listing ads, shopping ads. But the fact that they're trying to build out deals and customize feeds based on what you're looking for, they've got a really unique spot in the shopping space to be like, hey, here's the entire internet. Here's everything. You can just go look, figure out what you want. And I do think that they are kind of leaning into that, but hopefully AI overviews can balance that out for them.
And I think those AI overviews, they feel a bit sanitized on Google, and they don't really invite you to go deeper on that conversation. And I think for me, that's a bit the difference with the GPT experience. And I've stopped typing. So oftentimes now I just put GPT in the voice assistant mode, and I just have a conversation with the thing. And I feel like I'm not bound to like looking at my screen or like typing on my desktop. And like in these moments of, standing in line at the grocery store or sitting in the car, like I can actually go fairly deep on things that I've always wanted to know more about. And that can inform my decisions then later on about what it is I want to buy, which then also means that the traditional keyword as we've long known it just isn't as meaningful anymore, because Christine, like you were pointing out in Perplexity, it just gets you, right? And part of the reason it gets you is because it has a memory of everything you've done. And sort of these large language models, they can even integrate through the Meta glasses. They can integrate to the voice recognition pins. And so now you could say something as simple as like couch, and it knows all of the couches you've been looking at, or whether you have a stain on your couch, or whether you want to buy a new couch. It just has this context, and this dumb, like, very generic keyword could actually prompt the perfect ad for you. Could be that, or it could be completely on the other side, where it's you speaking 100 words about something, and in Google, you can't have a keyword that's that long, and that long tail aspect doesn't work anymore. But Perplexity, GPT, they get it. They know, okay, this is what it meant. This is the right ad. And we see that on Microsoft too. I mean, Microsoft has higher CTRs on ads when it's next to the generative experience than if it was just a traditional SERP.
Yeah. And I think maybe to Google's credit, I think we're talking about how we use these things differently, right? Like I have some queries where I want to go to Google to ask for it, and then the AI overview is kind of in my face when I didn't necessarily want it. And then I'm going to perplexity.ai when I want more of those conversational queries. So I kind of think that's part of the problem with Google too, is I just wish they were keeping it more separate. But I feel like they're kind of forcing it on us right now for the rollout, and it's just making it all like a mess.
Besides what the generative results look like, talk to me a little bit about in an agency setting or in your day-to-day lives. What are some of your favorite Gen AI ways of or using Gen AI?
Yeah, so I mean, I think just some of the things that have really helped us specifically are on like asset creation, right? Like that really can speed things up. It also really takes some fine tuning to get that to look good. Like Fred, I've seen all your presentations, and I guarantee you're not putting in one, half-hearted prompt to get what you're getting out of there. So there's just an example, like since, the AI boom, we hired a designer. We are like, a lot of stuff looks the same, right? We just want to be better, right? And it doesn't mean that this designer just doesn't use AI. No, they'll come up and place different things the way they want it to. Where should these things go? Then go use something like Adobe Firefly, create like actual images, and then have them placed over where they should be. So it definitely helps save time. I think just for me, like a lot of really what I use it for is just ChatGPT. Specifically using it. I know that Amy Hebden has a fantastic article over on Search Engine Land. It's like the 17 ways that PPC advertisers can use prompts. But just doing some basic competitor digging, like what is their benefit prop? What do they do well? What are people saying about this? What aren't they saying about? What are they saying about me? Where's the overlap? Like having to do some of that like intern-esque work is just what I think is right now the best use of time.
I feel like Greg did a lot of great examples for how we use it now at our agency. Another thing I would add is just with like tedious things like emails, client correspondence, I really like to use it to get me started on those things, and then I'll kind of fine tune it with my own brain. And then my mind was really blown by your talk at the most recent SMX about using it to build PPC scripts, Fred. I think that could be really a game changer because I do not have that coding experience, and I feel like it could really help even like lowly marketers like me be able to do stuff like that. So I'm excited about like possibilities like that in the future as well.
Well, and it's interesting, right, that you say that, because like I happen to know how to write code, but I'm a lot less hands-on in accounts, so I don't necessarily know what it is I should be doing, but I know how to do it. And then you're saying, like, on the other side of the fence, maybe you don't have the script ability, but you know exactly how you would manage an account. And so what was so brilliant to me is this multimodality of GPT. You can literally have a team meeting, go up to a whiteboard and sketch out, like, this is the flow that we go through when we manage, say, a search term or an ad creative or whatever it is. And you draw these little flow charts, and then you take a picture and you're like, hey, GPT, can you turn this into a script? And boom, it spits one out. And so... and the other thing I talked about in the session that you saw was the selection of the GPT model. And I'm a very big GPT fan, so I talk mostly about OpenAI. And I'm just to give some context on that, it's not that I think the others are bad. I think it's just like they're all playing the same game. So whatever's in Claude this week, it'll be in GPT next week and vice versa, right? So rather than me trying to split my brain and try to keep up with everything, I sort of put my eggs in the GPT basket. But in GPT, the latest model that came out is O1, and it's really good at reasoning. So the older models like 4.0, you basically had to say like step by step, this is how I would optimize my account. And so that flow chart, which you give a picture of, that would have been really helpful to the system. But now in O1, you can almost say like, this is the end state of the goal that I want to come out with. Then it'll figure out what are the steps to take to achieve that. And it'll actually explain those steps. So you're not left guessing. Did it understand what I want? And did it have the right strategy to execute on that? But it actually says like, listen, here's the 35 steps that I would go through to achieve your outcome. And then you can say, okay, well, that step looks right, but that one looks a bit off. And you start having the conversation back and forth until it really gets what you want to do. And then it builds the code for you. So that O1 model, that one has been really fascinating. And I also really love the GPT-4 with Canvas, where it generates the code, but you can start editing the code right there on the screen. And then you can tweak it. And then you can say, oh, GPT, by the way, there was an error that came back from Google. This was the error. And it leaves your changes of the code alone. And it just fixes the things that need to be fixed. But if you've already like put in an email address or you've put in some like numbers that matter to your account, it leaves that stuff alone. So you're not constantly like rewriting the same portions of the code. So yeah, I'm super excited about all the things and how GPT can make scripting faster.
Yeah, and I bet there's people listening right now that are like, this sounds scary. Fred, I don't know if you caught it, but I had seen that in the earnings call, Google has said that 25% of the code now that is being put out by Google is AI created code, which is wild to me that it's that high for something like Google.
Right, and for people who are not coders, it's like we all write, we all speak English, and we all know the process of writing. Like Shep, you were saying, right? I mean, you know what you want to put in the email, but the work of putting it on the page and then going and fixing the spelling mistakes because I can't type very well, right? So then I always have to go back. Like, that's the tedious stuff that just takes time that you shouldn't be spending. Like, it's the thought that's in your head. Like, let's just get that on the paper. And it's the same in programming and programming fundamentally for ad scripts. It's not even the programming that's interesting. It's knowing what you should do in the account. What is the strategy that's going to make that account perform better? And that's the thing that you, as the listener, as the PPC specialist, that's what you know. And now you have a facility for this thing that speaks the foreign language of code, but it can take your input, what's in your brain, and turn it into that foreign language that you can then copy paste into Google. You can just run it. And most of the time it doesn't work out of the box, but luckily that system is smart enough that you just say like, listen, here's the error that I got back from Google, and it'll go and fix it.
Yeah, I thought that was one of the most eye-opening parts of your talk, actually, Greg. He just went back and forth with, okay, it didn't work the first time. This is what I asked them to do to fix it. And like, eventually it worked out. So again, it seems really intimidating, but if you just get started and then you just keep asking those little questions until it works, I feel like it seemed like even I could do it. So I'm excited to give it a try.
Well, we'll have to do a follow-up episode and see how Shep has become like the greatest scripts programmer, hopefully.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about kind of the new theme of this show, right? But how do you safeguard your career in PPC, digital marketing, or maybe not even that, but what do you do when all this AI is coming in and doing some of the stuff that we've done historically, like writing ads, assets, figuring out the right search terms, automated bidding from Google, that's basically machine learning. So as more of that is being done by the machines, like what is it that we should focus on to ensure that we make a living?
Yeah. So, I mean, to me, I think there's a lot of like people that look at it from like a doom and gloom lens, and think that this could take jobs. I mean, it may take some low level jobs, but that's going to be across the board for everything. And I mean, I think what a better way to look at it is, what are some of these time savings going to allow you to do that you just didn't have time to before, right? Like, instead of just running campaigns, look at this, like, how do we actually go through and analyze that data and break it down? And maybe we were just setting up leads before and just driving those. And now we want to really try to work back, do value-based bidding like we talked about, or even like, hey, I want to do more. I want to do more than just Google, to what Shep was talking about before. Like, where else can you go? What else can you do? Like, maybe you haven't done Reddit ads or something. Like, I think if you look at it from the fact, how much time am I saving and what would I do? There's a lot of options there. And I would say use AI to save time for you, to get better in other areas and do better for your company, to do better for your clients, right? How can you do more with that? I don't know, Shep, I don't want to take all the answers, so I'll let you jump in here.
Yeah, so I feel like one of the biggest things, again, just using it, like Greg said, to get better, use that time to diversify your skill set more. So you're not using that time to train other people or do some of those lower level tasks yourself. But just to really grow your skills in other places and other platforms. But I also think it's just really focused on to like what AI can't do, like what service can you provide your clients, like what can you learn about your clients that automation can't offer, and really growing yourself there as well. So whether you're like meeting other people in the industry, it'll give you more time to do stuff like that. We just were at a talk together, Fred. So automation can help with that too. Like how can we use the automation to save time so we can travel more? And, so outside of just like automating tasks, it's like, how can you do it to grow yourself? And I think that's really exciting.
Yeah. And even on Marketing Clock, we use that, like, content. Right? Like we have, at the end of the show, we do like a funny segment. The whole show is supposed to be entertaining and edutainment. But we do like trivia and stuff like that. And we know the actual value isn't in the trivia questions, right? It's in the back and forth, the conversation, and having fun and laughing and spreading enjoyment, right? So we can say, all right, I'm going to just automate this. And then we know that it's us doing the actual, the secret sauce, let's say. So, I think it's, you need to figure out what that secret sauce is for you, for your company, your clients, and put more towards that and say, yeah, I now have I think most people are like, I've got this bucket list of things I want to do, and I just don't have enough time to get there. And this bucket is just sitting here and it's full. And I think it's time to say, like, all right, cool. Go expand your horizons, start pulling stuff out of that bucket list, start going with it. And yeah, use ChatGPT to help your keyword research, right? Like use image tools to help you with your image assets. Like you don't have to, it's not as much work anymore. So expand yourself and don't take it as a negative, take it as a positive. And
it is a double-edged sword because, Greg, I all of a sudden want to do so many things that I didn't think I could ever do in the past. But now with Gen AI, it's like, ooh, I actually could. And my list has gotten so long, like my mind is spinning. It's crazy. At some level, I think I'm more stressed than I've ever been just because the opportunity seems so tremendous. But to what you both were saying, right? Don't fear it, but fear others who use it better. Make it part of your repertoire and make it enable you to do better things, more things. But yeah, at some level, I also have to figure out like where am I going to have the focus to not do everything that I could now do, but what are the most useful things? But luckily, we can go to GPT and be like, hey, here's the 10 things I've been thinking about doing. Which ones do you think I should work on? And it being a friendly advisor, it's going to get you back on the right course. Yeah. And it's even just those little improvements too. Like, I know you've got grandiose ideas and people will be like, I don't know. I'm not the same as Fred, but like you're probably doing reporting right now, or the way that you've done it and you're reporting from 3 years ago, it should be different than today, right? It should be. You should be able to take that data, be able to help get more insights out of it, right? People don't want data, they want insights. And I think you should be looking this way. How am I improving everything? How am I being more valuable? How am I separating myself from other people out there? And you've got this, this opportunity to really take some time, invest in it and say, yeah, I want to do better on all these things. Go pull that data, give me these scripts and do all this different stuff so that I don't have to keep doing this routinely. So Shep, if people want to watch Marketing O'Clock, get in touch with Cypress North, what else should they do? Where can they find all of these things?
So Marketing O'Clock, we release new episodes every Friday on YouTube or your favorite podcast player. If you're on the East Coast, it's more like Thursday night. But again, covering all the digital marketing news of the week. Cypress North, you can hit us up if you want to work with us at cypressnorth.com. I am Shep Zernheld on X. Greg, do you want to? should plug
Yeah,
yourself.
and I actually save so much time with AI that I've got another show now too. It's a daily show, Monday through Thursday, with Barry Schwartz, Morty Oberstein, and Crystal Carter. It's over on the Rusty Brick YouTube channel. I just was like, hey, look, what am I going to do with all this time? I'm going to be bettering myself, talking with Barry every single day, getting in front of more people. And so that's called It's New, and of course, Marketing Cloud.
Nice. Well, hey, thanks for sharing all those amazing perspectives on the industry that we work in. So I really hope people will subscribe to your show and check it out. If you've enjoyed this episode, please give it a like and also subscribe to find out when the next one is coming. Greg, Shep, thank you very much for being on. And everyone, thanks for watching. We'll see you for the next episode.
Thank you.
Bye.